Good morning, everybody. Y'all energy is not lit enough. I'll explain what that means later. Good morning, everybody. So, you guys should know that we have the responsibility of really sort of like determining what kind of energy the rest of this conference is going to have. And so we have to ensure that we bring a certain type of fervor and passion and power to what we bring forth for the rest of this time here. So I'll try that one more time. Invoke my Pentecostal pedagogy and black preacher and say one more time, good morning, everybody. Now that's what I'm talking about. All right, so I don't have much time. I got a lot of things to share. But I want to begin with a sort of precursor to my talk that is important for us to sort of like carve out and hash out. And we always have to hash these things out whenever we're having a conversation with folks who are invested in education from different perspectives. To me, being at South by Southwest EDU 5 years ago and then being here today really like speaks a lot to the fact that the general public is so much more engaged in discourse around education than ever before. It is rare that an organization that has intentions or has sort of an origin that's much separated from education has carved out this space and then grown so exponentially. And whenever that happens, you have to understand that you're bringing folks into the fold and into the field that may not necessarily align to the core tenets of those who've been doing this education work for real. And so before we get into the work, I want to make distinctions between the three audiences that we're going to have here today and speak to each of them. So first, I want to speak to our friends, my friends. And my friends are those folks who understand the idea that education is essentially the civil rights issue of our time, that we cannot have conversations about education without talking about equity and diversity, that we can't really call ourselves educators without understanding that our work is not just about teaching, but it's about understanding the social, emotional dynamics of teaching and learning, the culture of young people, psychology, sociology, all melded together in this perfect gumbo that happens when you get into the classroom. So I want to first of all talk to my friends who understand that. And y'all, not everybody in this room understands that. And then secondly, I want to talk to the enemies. And we got to be clear that we have some folks in the building who are enemies. And not enemies because they're inherently bad people, but they're enemies because they come to this conversation at South by Southwest EDU because it's a time for them to be able to pitch their new product or make social connections with folks in certain spaces or talk about their new tech initiative or tech company they're trying to build up or pitch stuff to schools and curriculum. And I'm just saying to you that if that's your sole intention of coming to a gathering of educators, in many ways I'm going to have to position you early on as not being exactly where I'm at. So you're sort of the enemy. And then lastly, perhaps most significantly, I want to talk to the frenemies. And under the frenemies, there are certain distinctions that have to be made there as well. See, there are frenemies who know they're enemies, but come off as friends. And these are the folks who understand all the language. They will cite you some Dewey, cite you some Vygotsky, might throw in a little Piaget for measure shit. They might just bring in a little Paulo Freire, and you're like, ooh, they really bought that life. And these folks, when they come through with that kind of representation, you're like, yes, I'm with you, but they have ulterior motives. They're really more the enemies, but understand the discourse of the friends, so they position themselves as frenemies. So we got to watch out for them cats, but they're here. And then there's the other layer of the frenemies, and these are the folks I want to talk to in particular today, right? Which are the folks who actually come to this work with amazing intentions, who really believe in what we said the friends believe in. But by virtue of being a part of systems and institutions and structures that do not value certain populations, they end up being enemies despite the fact that their intentions are good. And today what I want to talk about is how do we engage in a conversion of the frenemies to join the friends, to disperse the enemies from amongst our fold, and reimagine new possibilities for education. And now I can get into my talk. So the title of the talk is, We Got It From Here, Thank You for Your Service. And before I really describe to you why I chose this topic, I have an image under there of the Dinka tribe. And the Dinka tribe is a tribe in Sudan that has a very storied and powerful origin and beginning. Early on in their history, the Dinka actually suffered from an outbreak of sorts of tetanus. And the tetanus caused the young folks to have lockjaw. And what the lockjaw did is it literally slammed the jaws shut. And because the jaws were slammed shut, it was impossible for those young people to get the food and the nutrients that they needed to be able to grow. Who's following me? Okay? And so the tribe had food available, but they couldn't feed their children. So they said, we've got to do something about this. So the only thing they could think about to do something about this was they said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to have to literally extract out, pull out the teeth of the young people once their teeth are formed. And they would invoke this violence on the young people, ripping out the teeth. But they ripped out the teeth because if they could rip out the teeth from the young people, then you can parse open their lips just a little bit and give them the food that they needed, and they can ingest the food and then be able to survive this outbreak. You guys are following me? So it was necessary for them to be able to do this violent practice on the young people for the sake of ensuring that they got the food that they needed, the nutrients that they needed. And this goes on for generation after generation. And the young folks then learn how to eat, and they can soak in the nutrients that they need. And after a while, what happens is they become strong enough and they overcome this lockjaw. And no longer was a condition that affected their ability to be able to ingest food. However, because it had become ritualized practice to extract out the teeth of the young people from when they were young, even though there was no longer a need to do it because they can open their mouths willingly and take in the food, it had become practice to rip out the teeth. So the folks in certain tribes within the Dinka would continue to rip out the teeth of the young people, not because it was essential, but because it had become tradition. In contemporary education, we follow that exact same model. When we think about the young folks among us who are most marginalized, who have not been able to really sort of partake in this wealth of knowledge that we have around us today, historically, what happened is that we had to rip out their teeth in order for them to learn. The ripping out of the teeth, to me, is the extraction of culture. The extraction of culture has been a necessary component of teaching in America for the sake of allowing young folks to be able to have some food, some knowledge. Y'all with me? And so this goes on for quite a while, and the teeth are getting ripped out, and the equivalent of teeth getting ripped out. You know Brown versus Board of Ed, the forced moving of a young girl into an all-white school. Why do you think the parents sent the kid to that school, knowing she's going to get spit on and cursed at? Because they knew that that child needed the food of the education she could receive in the other school. I'm weaving this narrative. Y'all got to stay with me now. All right? So this goes on for a while. And now we are in 2017, and in 2017, information is readily available to young folks who've been marginalized in school. They can go on Google and soak in the information. They can open up their windows, open up their eyes, and just see the world around them and learn. At the time, it was necessary for their culture to be extracted from them, for them to be able to have access to the schools who could give them the appropriate information. And today, the information is all around them, but we are still extracting out their culture in schools. We are still doing the violence the Dinka did on the young folks to get food on young people for getting knowledge in classrooms and schools. We are all collectively complicit in the process of devaluing the natural knowledges of certain young people from certain segments of our population. And that should rattle you. That should shake you. And if it doesn't, I'm worried about you. And that should lead you to the title of this talk, which is, we got it from here, thank you for your service. Now, we integrated the schools. We sent black kids to white schools, but we never integrated the curriculum. We never integrated the pedagogical approaches. We never integrated the community. And so you can physically integrate the schools, but without integrating the approaches, it still becomes a violent space. Now we're in 2017, the schools are more segregated than they've ever been. So now we got resegregated schools, but using the pedagogical frameworks of the integration schools. You understand what I'm saying? So it's going to require us having a more robust approach to teaching and learning, not just in white schools and black schools, but in all schools. Because also we got to keep in mind, all students benefit. You know, at the end of the day, all youth benefit of being exposed to a more diverse and robust approach to teaching and learning. All youth benefit from not having a singular assessment, right? All youth benefit from that complexity. Sometimes we associate complexity with chaos because we view it as chaotic because it's not like what we know. But it's not really chaos, it's just complexity, and you need to learn to appreciate the complexity. So look, in 44 seconds, I can't answer another question, but you could tweet them to me. I'm gonna be on Twitter all night long. You tweet them to me at Chris Emdin, hashtag hip hop ed or hashtag whatever it is. But if you tweet me, I'll respond to every single question. I hope you guys have an amazing conference. Please don't take this talk as entertainment. Please take this talk as something in the back of your minds. On a lens through which you look at all the sessions that you attend for the rest of this conference, and a lens through which you look at all the work that you do after you leave this conference in education. Because you know we got it from here. Thanks for your service.